think I started sending things off in my mid-20s and had a lot of half-finished novels. And then in 2019, I actually finished something. And I really, really loved those characters and sent that novel off and found an agent relatively quickly. And then it just got rejection after rejection from publishing houses. Whereas when we hear someone's name and it's just a collection of letters, and yet from that we can access every single thing we know about that person, whether it's the way they make us feel or the way they walk or the way they smell or what their job is. And it's that just feels so powerful, that it's this random collection of letters, and yet it's like opening a filing cabinet and just picking out everything you know about that person. Because I think in the moments when we're not happy with our life, we're so aware that it could just be meeting the right person or getting accepted to the right job that changes the course of our life. But if we are happy with our lives, we're also so aware how precarious it is that we find ourselves in this life, because at any moment we could have been thrown off course.
Hello, everybody. We're all still filtering in, which is really exciting. I feel like this is going to be an extremely popular book club this evening. I mean, I've been so excited to kind of get to chat to Florence, and I know the book has been something that everybody really loved. So yeah, it's really lovely to kind of have you all on the call with us this evening. Just before Florence and I kick off, just a reminder that you're very welcome to ask questions in the chat. So I'll say hello in the chat so people can find it. But also there's like a Q&A function as well. It should be working. So do feel free to pop questions in there and we can kind of answer those as we go. But yeah, so with that, hello Florence.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm really good, thank you. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How has your day been?
It's been very nice, actually. Yeah, no, I've had another online event earlier today, so I've just had those two things to do and nothing else. So it's been very relaxed.
That is delightful. Are you still very much kind of in the kind of PR phase of?
Well, no, it's been funny actually, because I'm only just coming out of hibernation, because I finished publicising the hardback last October, and then have been working on my next novel, and have been kind of doing bits and pieces of kind of PR for publicity for the translation editions, but have mainly focused on that. And so really this is today's kind of I was in Germany last week, but today's my first proper day back doing publicity around the paperback.
That's so exciting. Like to hear that you're kind of still able to do the public, like the translation stuff is really so amazing, like how that all comes around, and the amount of work that goes into getting it into other countries is like always phenomenal. But also to hear that you're writing something new, like I can't wait to hear more about that. But no, that's so like, that's incredible. And like I don't know how many people on the call obviously like kind of know, I've only learned it through doing stuff with authors, but like obviously your publisher will have to kind of go out and pitch to places, right, to kind of get the translations.
Well, it tends to be that my agents do that. So your UK publisher publishes throughout the Commonwealth, and then your agents sell rights around the rest of the world. So yeah,
that's amazing. And like I guess like a more of a general point, like with the names being your debut novel, did you have any like real understanding of what publishing looked like before you published?
I had a little bit of an understanding, partly actually through having gone through the rejection process with a previous novel that I'd written. I'd written something. So actually, I've been writing since I was 21, and I'm now 49. So I've been writing a long time to get to this point of this finally being a debut that's actually being published. And I think I started sending things off in my mid-20s, and had a lot of half-finished novels. And then in 2019, I actually finished something, and I really, really loved those characters and sent that novel off and found an agent relatively quickly. And then it just got rejection after rejection from publishing houses. And I suppose from that experience, I actually learned quite a lot. And also, in a way, learned that rejection is often, I mean, you do hear about those amazing stories where people able to, they just managed to come up with this wonderful novel first time, but that hasn't been the case for me. And so there's been quite a lot of rejection built into it. And I do think I'm imagining maybe a lot of your members also write. And I do think it is one of those things where you just, you're almost doing it because you can't not. And it did take me, after the rejection in 2019, I did have about a year where I didn't write and I just read. And not really with any purpose, but afterwards, sorry, I'm kind of derailing the conversation just into let's talk about failure.
It's amazing.
But where I, for that year, I think previously I'd read mainly literary fiction, and for that year I started reading quite a bit of crime fiction and commercial fiction and book group fiction. And I think through that, it was almost like an unwitting education where I learned a lot about how to maintain narrative tension and about structure and pace, and just filled in some of the gaps for myself, and not really in any intentional way. It was just what happened. And so in a way, the rejection was really useful, and I can now see the flaws with that previous novel as well.
That's incredible. I think people often people often say like kind of rejection is redirection. I think at the time it's always harder to kind of feel that way, but it's really
so painful.
It is, and it's really demoralizing at times as well. But it's amazing to hear that you kind of like, I guess, took it away and decided to kind of go away and really learn your craft a bit more, I guess, as well, like as it were. To, I mean, obviously you're a writer and you've been writing for many years by that point anyway, but to kind of delve into what other people are doing and kind of learning from others. Are there any like particular books or like authors you read at the time that you felt like really were helpful for you?
It was it's so odd because this book isn't actually a writing book, but I don't know whether you've come across Oliver Burkeman's 4,000 Weeks. But he said it's the average number of kind of weeks on Earth that most of us will have averages out to be 4,000 weeks here, and he's incredibly good at focusing you on how you really want to spend those 4,000 weeks. And I think he really made me think, what are the things where if I was to get to the end of my life and I still haven't done them, what are those things that really matter? And he has this idea that you can only focus on 3 things in any meaningful way at any one time to have a chance of seeing those 3 things to fruition and completion. And so I suppose for me it was really refocusing and thinking, I'm so desperate still to write a novel, and this has to be one of my 3 things, and restarting again with the names. And actually that book had just such a kind of profound impact on me. I love Oliver Burkeman, and he writes from such a nice position as well, because he seems to write from this position of he's just trying to work it out too, rather than that he's kind of up on this pedestal telling you what to do. And he's got such a lovely kind of tone about him.
That sounds amazing. I've never heard of this book or him, but I definitely feel like it's one of those books that, like you said, like I think sometimes you can read, I guess they fall into the category of self-help in some way or another. But often, like you said, like it's quite nice to read from the perspective of someone that's also kind of just still trying to work it out themselves. And I guess that's also like, I mean, turning a little bit to your book, I think like that to me was one of the things that stuck with me the most about the names. Was it very much felt like kind of something that you could be drawn into yourself, or you could kind of understand the perspective of somebody. And I think it's just amazing that reading can do that for us, that you can really kind of learn a perspective or feel a bit more kind of like, a bit more companionship just from reading something.
It's that thing, isn't it, of I think that often when I read a news story, I'll be affected by it and understand it on an intellectual level, but it's often when I read about something in fiction, I read about a person's experience in fiction, and you see one person's experience where you hear about those really, really tiny things in their day of maybe what it's like to live in a country that's under siege. And that those are the things that then when you're watching the news, you have just a deeper understanding of what those people might be going through as individuals. And I think that's fiction tends to be my way of processing the world rather than through facts in a way.
Absolutely, I totally agree with that. I work in like my day job is unfortunately not in books, but I work kind kind of in politics, and I agree, like you can read and like listen to certain, like my whole job is keeping on top of what's happening in the world, and you get such a perspective in terms of you can kind of reel off what's happening and understand like what are the big real life implications of that in terms of the world. But it's easy to kind of detach from the fact that it's individuals, and that's what I love about reading as well. It's like you get to learn so much about what someone's experiencing or what's another person's experience. And I'm a big believer that fiction it really helps you exercise empathy and like understand it, because empathy is like a muscle. I think it's not something that it is innate. I guess it goes back to like nature versus nurture, but it's something that when you're reading from someone else's perspective.
And I guess it's also that often, particularly in a book with multiple perspectives, you're existing in much more of a grey area where you're inhabiting different people's perspectives and actually identifying with each one as you go round. And
definitely, it's a great way to kind of draw people together, and I guess also realise that like we all have a lot more in common than we think, really, don't we?
Yes.
But turning a little bit more to your book, I mean, so we did a little bonus chapter last week, which is where we kind of sit down and discuss like a book, more book clubby but online, and we did the names. And
thank you.
Of course, I was so excited to run it. And one thing that came out of the discussion was that no one has read a book like this before. Obviously you get a bit of sliding doors, but I think like the concept of focusing around the names and circumstance was just so original. And like, how did you come up with it?
Gosh, so I think in a way it was just that I suppose the thing that I'm always thinking about is what makes each of us us. And I suppose wanting to think about whether that's our upbringing and our families or our material circumstances or the friendships that we make. And also at what point in that autonomy takes over and kind of moving into adulthood and thinking about, okay, so this is the self that's been formed by childhood, and then who am I next? And I think that names, because we're given them at birth and then we take them everywhere we go with them, and often people will hear them before they even meet with us, and I think particularly now, you know, where it may affect whether we're invited in for a particular job or if you're of a generation that uses dating apps, it's you know, people will hear your name or see your name and decide whether they want to go on a date, you know. And it feels like because people are bringing so many of their own associations and assumptions to it, but then it also affects our sense of self as well. And I think the thing that I often think about with names is how when we see a picture, that picture is it's capturing someone in a very static moment at a particular age and a particular time and a particular mood. Whereas when we hear someone's name and it's just a collection of letters, and yet from that we can access every single thing we know about that person, whether it's the way they make us feel or the way they walk or the way they smell or what their job is, and it's that just feels so powerful that it's this random collection of letters, and yet it's like opening a filing cabinet and just picking out everything you know about that person. And so it feels like a really rich area for fiction.
Absolutely, I absolutely love that kind of analogy of a name is the filing cabinet, and it's a thing you associate. It's like it's your first line of your identity, isn't it?
It is, and what's so shocking about that is it's not even an identity that we choose. It's
No.
you know, and everyone's judging us on the basis of our names, and yet we haven't chosen them. So it's a really odd thing, isn't it?
It is. It's fascinating, and I mean, like, I think for me, especially the concept of a name, it has such interesting implications, because my name is one that most people get wrong. I've known people. I had a piano teacher for 8 years, and I just didn't correct my name, and he just called me the wrong name for 8 years until I got to the end of my piano lessons with him, and I was like, I'm so sorry, Mike. My name's not Nahar, it's Nahar. And he was like, why did you never correct me? And I was like, I don't know. It sometimes feels finicky to be able to correct that into somebody else. But I also kind of love the fact that he has this picture of me of being Nahar, and having like a part of myself that I associate with that time, and really fond memories, which I think is very fun. But I think having a like you said, like some names come with association, some names like mine I assume don't, because it's quite an unusual name and most people haven't ever heard of it.
And I think one of the things that a lot of people have told me is that if you have a name that's difficult to pronounce or people are uncertain around it, they then avoid saying it. And so in some ways that can feel like a really odd thing to move through the world, with people just not saying your name the normal amount that they might say it to other people, and what a kind of odd depersonalizing thing that can be at times.
Absolutely. It can definitely feel quite erasing at times. I think often, but then the flip side of that is when people take so much care over a name, not whether it's giving it to a child or to take care to kind of make sure that they're getting your name right. I think you can always tell it's a very special feeling when someone says, no, I really want to make sure I'm getting it right. To me, it always feels like a deeper level of like care and consideration. It feels seen. To have someone say, no, I want to see you in the way that you are presented to the world, I think it's very special. But yeah, I'm totally on board with the idea that I'm surprised that there is not more kind of fiction, or at least fiction that I've seen, or literature around names. I think it's just incredible. How did you choose the names for each of the characters in the novel? Because I guess with Gordon, Julian, Bear, the kind of some of the explanations were kind of given, but with Maya and Kora and obviously Gordon Senior, I'm very curious about those as well.
So with the boys, they were there from really early on, actually, in that with Gordon, I wanted a name that felt like it was a kind of quite a traditional name that could be handed down through the generations. And then I think I was immediately thinking, what can I use about this name to kind of send the book off in different directions? And if you remember the scene where Gordon Jr. is getting ready to go out to a party and he sees the gin bottle and identifies with, I don't like the taste, but it says my name on it, so I have to keep drinking it. And so that scene was the moment I thought of the name Gordon. I was also had that scene in my mind of how that could be shaping him as a teenager. And then with Bear, I wanted a name that felt so expansive that that child who lives within it can be anything. And I mean, Maya says that a boy with that name could be soft and cuddly and brave and strong, but it's that actually he could be either or all of them. And so that felt like quite an exciting name to play with and work out who he'd be. And then with Julian, I think you said you write, didn't you?
No, I don't.
Oh, you didn't write. Oh, okay. Sorry. So for any of the writers that are here with us this evening, I think one of the lovely things that often happens with writing is that there's just this kind of weird magic and serendipity that just comes sometimes. And so with Julian, I'd thought about his name because I knew that I wanted to, this always feels really obvious and clunky when I say it, and it's slightly embarrassing, but I wanted to play with the idea of nominative determinism in a slightly more straight way of Julian becoming a jeweler. But when I looked up that name and found it meant Sky Father, so Kora could say it's a tribute to you, and then she can be there thinking, and it would give you the chance to be elevated above all those awful line of Earth fathers. It's just, so many times I got handed little gifts like that where it was nothing to do with my own cleverness. It was just like, wow, that worked out really nicely. And just little things like Mary's husband, I put in the name Roland as a placeholder. And then at the end of the day, when I'd finished writing, looked up what Roland actually means, and it means famous throughout the land. And I've always kind of thought, well, was that then, and he's a musician. So I'd kind of thought, was that subliminal thing of, Roland manufacture musical equipment, and also was that why they then called their brand of equipment that? And so you get all these lovely little things where you're kind of thinking, gosh, I don't know, just where there are your own subliminal associations around names coming in as a writer as well.
Absolutely, that's fascinating, and I love the kind of like I love the meaning that names have, and I think it's really fascinating when you kind of do go into, is it the etymology of it, like a word or a name? I think that's the right word, and you kind of get a bit of
hoping that's, I don't know, but it sounds good.
I have to double check that, but kind of understanding the meaning and the origins of a name. I think it's always so like fascinating. Oh, Julie's put a thumb up, so I'm assuming that's the right word.
Okay.
But yeah, and it's like, that's so fun that there are so many kind of coincidences that you've had, but like you said, like there could have been some level of subconscious, particularly around Roland. That's great.
Yeah.
But I love that, like it's there's something really nice about it kind of being almost like patchworky in the way that it's come together, with like nice kind of elements of the novel presenting themselves in like these different ways. But also, like, obviously one of my favorite bits about the book is that you jump between the 7 years, and I think when I was reading, kind of doing a bit of research before this, the 7 years, this jump between is because it's the average amount of time. 7 times is the average amount of time it takes women to leave an abusive part. Am I right in thinking that?
You know, that's one of the other kind of, what lovely feels like the wrong word in the context of what you're saying there, but that was another piece of odd serendipity, because that wasn't actually why I picked 7 years. The reason why I picked 7 years was because there's an idea that the body renews itself in 7-year cycles.
Yeah.
And so it was actually that. But then readers started saying, oh, it's 7 years because of this. And it's so lovely that other people are then bringing their associations of why it might have been 7 years. And you're kind of there thinking, well, that's completely valid. It could just as equally be that. But that wasn't my intention behind it.
Oh, I love that. I love both of the kind of meanings there as well. That kind of the idea that you're an entirely new person in terms of your cells and everything over 7 years, and kind of seeing each of the boys and their families as well. That's really fascinating as well. But I guess like how did you find writing each of the kind of different narratives? So Jasmine's actually asked a similar question, but like, how did you write each of the narratives separately and then break them down, or was it kind of quite intentional that you were going to take points in time and then meet kind of boys where they're at that point?
With this, I wrote it in a completely linear way. So the way that you read it is the way that I wrote it. And I think that the really nice thing for me about doing it that way was that I hope that what readers will find when they come to the book is that it's not all, I mean, I know those first 3 chapters are quite harrowing at times, but beyond that, what I hope is that the book's a mixture of light and dark, and to provide some relief. And actually for me as a writer, that was a relief as well, because it meant that I could get to the end of spending that chapter with that boy and that family, and then deep breath, and you start, and it was always so lovely to be re-meeting these boys and families after a 7-year break, and sitting down and thinking, oh gosh, well, who are you going to be now? And then gradually meeting them over the course of that chapter, because it does fit. It felt like I was watching them grow up almost in front of me. And yeah, it was a really lovely structure to write within. And I think that just with some of those scenes that were more difficult to write, gave me some breathing space around that.
That's amazing. And I love the idea that you're kind of sitting down and thinking, like, who are you now? And because I guess that was it, like my experience as a reader was very similar. It's kind of getting to each of them and thinking, I mean, you'd read the first chapter and go, okay, well, that's great, they're still having a good time, or they're experiencing X, Y, or Z, but then kind of moving on to the next boy and thinking, well, what comes next for you? And I think especially it was so easy to fall in love with each of the characters in various different points in the book in different ways as well. You really found that you were, like, I found at least, I was rooting for them kind of at so many different points. I mean, particularly with Gordon Jr., like, he really, you know, it takes such a long cycle for him to kind of have his redemption arc, but by the time at which he has it, it feels like the right place for him, and it feels nice to have kind of experienced a character that feels very like as well.
Yeah, I remember writing Gordon Jr. and that scene where he is 14 and goes to the gathering and has that awful scene with Lily. And even as I was writing it, thinking, oh gosh, no, don't do it, but also knowing that he needed to do those really difficult things to then kind of come through it and learn who he wanted to be later as a person.
Absolutely. I think it's I mean, like you said, like it's kind of like you're watching them grow up in the same way that I guess when you have other people around you, or if you have children yourself, I don't know, but it's the same thing. Like my mum always says, like sometimes you just have to let people make mistakes and kind of, you know, and it's this, I guess it must be the same feeling for kind of your characters as well.
Yes.
We've got lots of lovely questions in the chat, so I'll go through them as we speak as well. But Sam has said congratulations on the book, and thank you for sharing the incredible story with us, and she spent a long time waiting to get her hands on the paperback. I need to order my paperback version because I got it on Kindle to start with and was like, any book I love I read on Kindle first and then buy the physical copy, so I'm very excited to have. Chloe has said,
thank you, Sam.
Chloe said, did you find a sense of obligation to victims when you were writing about domestic abuse?
Yeah, I thought about that a lot, because I think one of the things at the front of my mind when I was first setting out this novel was how could I write about domestic abuse and avoid the pitfall of it feeling gratuitous in any way? Or I think we're all very sensitized to the idea of a woman's fear becoming entertainment. And how could I write about this subject and avoid that from happening? And one of the things that I tried to do with that was, when you think about the perpetrator of domestic abuse and that they hold all the power and the control, and I wanted to wrest it away from Gordon Sr. and give it back to Kora and her children. And so the story is very much their story, told from their point of view. And what I hope is that Gordon Sr. feels very barely sketched in at all. It's that I was hoping you have enough of a sense of him for him to be believable, and for you to understand the dynamic that's happening in that family, but so that you don't actually have to know him, you just see the consequences of what he does. But I think that the other thing is that once you're past those first 3 chapters where it's each version of that boy's life, where initially there are some really difficult scenes that felt necessary in order to understand what Kora was actually facing, that after that I was very keen to not just have scene after scene after scene of kind of violence. And so what I tried to do was to focus on the different levers of control that Gordon might be using, whether that was taking away her financial independence, or social isolation, or throwing her sanity into question so that she would feel she wouldn't be believed. And then for there to only be one instance of each of those types of abuse. And then I think probably, sorry, I'm going on and on, but I think the final thing that I did to try and take care of the reader, because I was really aware, as well as wanting this to be, as well as feeling a responsibility towards people who are actually living through this and wanting to reflect that experience in what I hope was some kind of adequate reflection of it, but was also wanting to take care of the reader. And so when we realised that Julian has lost his mum and we know that something's absolutely terrible's happened there, I felt right from the very beginning that I was never actually going to fill in what that thing was or how she died, because the reader already knows what Gordon Senior is capable of, and we don't actually need that bit filled in. The kind of imagination does enough for you, and then you can leave it there. Sorry, that was the longest. That was Chloe, wasn't it? But thank you for the question.
Please, no, don't apologise. It's fascinating to kind of hear your perspective and your kind of, I guess, like the origins for these things and where they come from. Like it's so, yeah, these are the conversations we love, because as readers, we never get to ask the questions. So it's amazing when we finally do. That's absolutely fascinating. And I think I really, like, it's really lovely to kind of hear about the kind of consideration taken to the reader, as well as also trying to balance the actual like realities of that kind of level of abuse as well. Something I thought that you did really like incredibly well in the novel, and that came across amazingly, was kind of just also the impact on the children, because I think often like domestic abuse doesn't just affect the mother, it's often like children that also kind of bear the brunt of it. And even kind of seeing Maya changing her patterns of behavior to try and appease her father, like it was just so skillfully done, and you can really picture it being a reality for somebody. It was just so sad, but also just, I think it's a real kind of commendation to like the level, like the quality of your writing, and just like how relatable it could be.
Thank you. I was also really lucky very early on to be put in touch with Henu Cummings, who at that point ran a domestic abuse a women's refuge, and so was able to actually speak to someone where this was the day-to-day reality of her work was, and she was able to talk to me about the kind of dynamic that would form around a character like Gordon. And obviously always kind of feel at pains to say that none of the things that she told me from real people's experiences are in the novel. That was all, you know, the product of my imagination, although Henu did read the book afterwards and said, you know, she's worked with thousands of families over the years, and she said there's literally nothing in here that I haven't seen myself and heard about, which feels really sobering when you think of some of the scenes. So yeah, absolutely.
And I think your book, I hope at least it plays like quite a significant part in also understanding the kind of barriers to someone leaving as well. I think like your book obviously deals with circumstance, and like I guess someone in the bonus chapter the other day had a really beautiful kind of interpretation of the book, and she said it wasn't necessarily about the boys as much as it was about Kora and her kind of state in each of the kind of sections of the novel, or kind of between the stories. And I guess it kind of your book really shows like what are the barriers that could be there for a woman leaving.
Well, I think that was part of my reason for writing about it in a way, is that I think my way of processing things is often to read or to write about them. And I think although I understood on an intellectual level why someone doesn't leave, on an emotional level, I didn't quite understand it. But walking alongside Kora and her children, by the time I'd got to the end of the novel, I totally understood why someone often leave in those situations. And I think that's what I'm often trying to do with fiction, is work things out for myself of, well, you know, if you know the end result is that often people don't leave, why? And I mean, it's, you know, it's only one fictional family, but just walking alongside them, I felt like I learned something.
That's incredible. And I think it's so amazing to hear that in the writing process you get as much as you can from the reading process as well, of kind of really trying to unpick. But I guess from the writing process you really get to interrogate things and really kind of out the factual and the counterfactual as well, like what's the other side of the kind of narrative. It's amazing. Molly's also asked, did you write the book kind of knowing or having any idea of the end point for, I guess, not only the boys but also for Maya and Kora as well?
In a way. So I think the thing that I knew was that if you think of those boys and the circumstances that they're born into, I was imagining the challenges that they would face and the people they would become as a result of being shaped through those childhoods. And from there was then imagining them as adults and the emotional transition I wanted them to make to get from one place to a place of having grown and become their own people. And I guess knowing the start point and the end point, what you have in between is some stepping stones, and set every 7 years. And so in a way, knowing the start and the end, it was almost like, well, there's a blank canvas for me to just decide how they get there. And which was really nice, because I felt I could take them in all different directions and also explore some different ideas within that. One of the things that I often think about is the sense that occasionally people stay around longer than maybe they would, I don't know, to see the birth of a child or to see someone get married before they die. And I wanted to explore the idea of someone dying at a different age, which is Shilva, who I'm talking about here, with, you know, in one version of their lives, she dies much earlier, but in that narrative, in Julian's narrative, where she's so needed, she lives well beyond that point. And so I suppose I was also interested in writing about all those kinds of ideas of, just how we respond to circumstances.
Absolutely. I think that was, there's just so many things around your book, and I think so many themes that feel like you really kind of covered them in an incredible way. And I think, circumstance and also happenstance as well, because I think some of it was kind of just how it happened. I mean, even with Julian becoming a jeweler, that very much felt happenstancey, kind of quite incredible. But yeah,
I love that as a word, by the way. I think in the early 2000s or late 90s, Carol Shields wrote a novel called Happenstance, and I was actually working on a novel at that point and was going to call it Happenstance, and I was like, Dad, and it's such a lovely word.
It is. I think it's not used enough. There are so many words like that I'm like, they're not used enough, and they're really fun to kind of be able to kind of, I don't know. That's what I love about words. There's always something to describe something, which is great. I had another. Oh, you also kind of mentioned a bit about your research. I guess when we were talking a little bit more about the domestic abuse, was there kind of any other research that you kind of did for the novel, or was it more kind of an exploratory, innate kind of thing for you?
So that was probably the thing that I researched in the most depth. But then there was kind of various things like jewellery making and ballet and all sorts of different things like that. And I tended to research those more as I was going along, because I suppose that you always want to write about things. And actually, Maya being a doctor, there was quite a bit of research in there. But you always want to write about things so that you hope, if a reader knows a lot about that subject, that whatever you've written is going to be passable for them. And it's such a wobbly feeling, just knowing that someone who does, someone probably who reads your book is going to know a lot about it. But I suppose that I always want to know just enough to write about that in a reasonable way. But the thing I'm really interested in is the character's emotional response to those things. So with Julian and his jewellery making, what I was actually interested in is there's a scene where he talks about just being set alight by making jewellery. And I think that Shilva talks about how, as a child, because he's gone through that trauma of losing his mum at an early age, that he lives almost in grayscale. And then when he first discovers jewellery making, there's that line from the Sylvia Plath poem Morning Song going round his head of "Love set you going like a fat gold watch." And it's then the next line is something about the midwife slapping the foot soles. And really that it is that love and that energy from the world that really sets someone alight, and that Julian's spent a substantial part of his childhood having lost that. And then when he finds jewellery making, it's suddenly like that he's that tick 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 inside him is there again. And I can't remember how I've got on. I feel like I've just gotten off on a tangent. I'm no longer answering a question, so sorry.
No, honestly, that's fascinating, and it's really nice to kind of hear like where it's all come from, and like your emotional response to also kind of the characters finding their thing as well. Because I think, like, especially I actually make jewelry in my spare time, so that's actually one of my favorite things about the novel, was when I was reading it and I was like, oh, this never gets written about, this is so fun. But also,
do you have any feedback?
Oh, none. I mean, very much relatable in the sense that, like, right. I don't know, I was like, when I started making jewellery, I very much was also of a period where I was like, I have nothing else going on. I've moved home from university. I feel very sad and alone, and kind of that weird lack of identity kind of way. And then joined a class, and almost 4 years later, I'm still going to the same class with the same group of people.
Oh, how wonderful!
I've got a few rings on today that I've made.
Can you hold them closer up?
I'll take this. So this is one of my favourite ones. It's got like a little moonstone in it.
Oh, beautiful.
This was the first proper ring that I made. It has like a labradorite It's nice
Oh,
hammered.
your work's. I was going to say it looks hammered.
Yes, and then this is my most latest one, which is a Russian wedding ring. And I'm sure my colleagues actually hate me because I'm always fiddling with it at work, because it does this really fun thing where, if I can line it up correctly, it rolls up and down the finger.
Oh gosh,
So
I so want one of those now.
so easy.
That looks gorgeous.
It is, and they're so fun to play with. But it's
Yes.
To me, jewelry is like both an outlet and also identity as well. Like, I'm never without my rings. I feel very naked without them. But it's the idea that you can be set alight by something that gives you so much passion.
Yeah.
And also forces you to be away from other kind of thoughts, because when you're standing there and you're sawing something, or you're blowtorching something, or you're really trying to work out what's in front of you, you can't really, it's a really good way to kind of switch the rest of your brain off and really just hone in.
Very odd kind of thinking, isn't it? Because I think the thing that I've worked with fabric for years, so a slightly different outlet, but that's my understanding of it. And I think in that often I would lose hours and hours and hours and not have any awareness of thinking, but maybe get to the end of the day and something that I've been wrestling with in my own life, I would have worked myself out to a place where I was more okay with whatever that thing was, where you don't really understand the level on which you've been doing that, while also thinking really intensively about how to problem solve whatever it is that you're making. And it's just,
it's such a fascinating kind of process to go through. I think my sister also sews, so this is really fun, like kind of and she often says the same thing. She's like, if she's having a bad day, it's a thing she can kind of sit down and do, because it does take your mind. It's a little bit like I kind of like going for a run or going for a swim. Sometimes you need to immerse yourself so entirely in something else that you kind of come back to things either with a fresh brain, or like you said, you just worked it through in some way that it kind of settles.
I think the other thing with that wasn't intentional when I was writing the book, but afterwards I became more aware of it, is that when we're creative, we are kind of curious and we're open to making mistakes, and there's a process of trial and error there. But in a household like Gordon Jr.'s, there isn't room for making mistakes, and so there is a total absence of creativity, even if we consider creativity something like being able to choose your own books, which I do think that is quite a creative act myself. But whereas in the other narratives, there's so many different examples of creativity or people working with their hands. And so for me, I think that creativity is a way of exploring different levels of freedom within the book.
Absolutely, I love that, and I love the kind of the comparison of being able to kind of be creative, but also growing up in a household or being around in an environment initially where he wasn't able to do that, but that being the creativity being the thing that unlocks Julian particularly. One thing that kind of I also kind of thought about the other day was the symbolism of the bees. What was, because the anaphylaxis was devastating, and I think when Bear passes away, and then you have the other kind of brushes with it, where did that come from, and was it kind of intentional?
Well, they're actually wasps, and I think that's something where you either notice it or you don't, but I wanted to draw a line between Bees, his sister, and him being killed so it was a wasp that he's allergic to rather than a bee. But that came from when I'd very first written the book, Bear actually died with COVID. And then during the editing process, my editor said to me, we think this is too topical and dates the book and pins it to a certain age too much. And also for some readers will just be too much. And it's one of those things where the moment someone said something to you, you couldn't see it yourself at all, but you totally get what they mean. And I'm so pleased that wasn't the death that Bear had. Not that I'm pleased that he died in it. You know, the wasps weren't great either. But I think I agree with them that it does remove that extra tension that maybe people don't need throwing into the novel at that point. And so, but once I'd had that idea about it being the wasps, it was then, okay, so if he's allergic to these, then he's going to be allergic to them in every version of his life. And so those wasps are going to need to show up in each version. But it's just luck whether he has that reaction to it, and whether he's stung, or whether his father's there with a kind of vial of I can't remember what it's called, but the ephedrine, or so that was another thing to just the hand that fate deals us.
I think that's a really nice motif as well, to kind of draw it together, that they're not separate individuals. It's very much the same man and boy, but under different circumstances. And I hadn't actually considered that as being the kind of thing that draws them together, but I think it's really powerful as well. I mean, obviously Bear's death to me, like, absolutely devastating, and even Shilva's kind of death as well. I was like, oh, that's so heartbreaking. I mean, there's like you said, there are kind of moments of light and dark throughout the novel. Sophie's asked when she said when she read the book, she cried twice. And when you wrote it, were there points where you kind of felt too emotional, or did you kind of manage to separate yourself?
He was just sobbing through the whole of writing it. I'd come down to have lunch with my husband each day, and would be there kind of puffy-eyed, and he'd be there, oh gosh, have you been crying at your own writing again? But then but the nice thing is that I every chapter I write, I give it to my husband as I've written it, and he then gives me feedback on it. And he is my first reader and really instrumental in the writing process. And he would often cry as well. That was, but yeah, no, I cried a lot because I suppose for me, while I'm writing them, these characters are alive in my mind, and so I kind of felt what they went through really deeply.
Absolutely, that makes total sense. I also love that your husband is your first reader and is so supportive of your writing as well. That's amazing.
Yeah, he's really he so we read very, very different books. So in theory he wouldn't be my ideal first reader, but actually he just seems to know when I've got it right and when I haven't. And I mean, his most frequent feedback is, real people don't talk like that. And I will be kind of bringing, have I got it right now? No, you haven't got it right. And it's so helpful having that person whose criticism feels completely painless to me, because I know that when I do get it right, he'll be there kind of cheering for me. But it's you really want that person who will be absolutely brutal in their feedback and say, no, it's still not right, or this just doesn't, I'm bored. And
absolutely, that's fascinating. And like, I think it's really lovely as well that you can kind of receive the feedback from him in a way that, you know, it comes from like a place of love, as it were, as well. That's, I mean, a lot of people's done quite a few of these author Q&As, and some people it's their friends or it's other people, but it's very special, I guess, to have it from a partner as well. There was another question that came off this for a second. Was he your first reader when you kind of wrote your initial drafts as well? Because obviously you said you wrote a novel before this one as well. Was he kind of so instrumental in the process for that as well?
My poor husband, this has been quite a long journey for him. It's been as long a journey for me to getting published as it has me. But yes, we met at university, and so he's been my first reader for the last kind of however many years, and just a long time. And he's just always been there reading my work. And I mean, I did have a moment when I'd sent my manuscript off to agents, and I just remember sitting there one day and saying to him, what am I going to do if no one wants this novel either? And he just said to me, then you'll just write another one. And it really mattered to have that person saying, no, this is what you're meant to be doing, and you just need to keep on going.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really, like, really beautiful, actually. Like, I think to have,
I can see so many hearts.
I know, I was just looking at all this.
Thank you so much.
Beautiful. But I mean, it makes all the difference to have someone in your corner like that. And I guess if you've met them at university as well, it's such a formative time to have someone that's been with you through all of that and to kind of help you achieve this. It's absolutely amazing. I mean, really what we should all be looking for a partner, I imagine.
I found him on a bus. I didn't actually say, will you read my manuscript?
That was question 2. That's amazing.
Going back to that though, I think that one of the things that is a feature in the novel is the idea of fate and chance. And I think that one of the reasons why that interests me so much is because I think in the moments when we're not happy with our life, we're so aware that it could just be meeting the right person or getting accepted to the right job that changes the course of our life.
Mm-hmm.
But if we are happy with our lives, we're also so aware how precarious it is that we find ourselves in this life, because at any moment we could have been thrown off course.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I said I met my husband on a bus and he was wearing a band t-shirt that day, and it was a band that I knew, so I went up to him and chatted about the band. But I'm really aware that if he'd have put on a different t-shirt that morning, there's a chance I would have still met him, but it's
different.
And it's so I think that script about fate and chance is something that's always kind of running through my mind quite a lot.
Absolutely, I love that. And I think it even comes back in the novel with the vet, and kind of the fact that he appears, it is the vet, isn't it?
Felix.
Felix. Yeah. He appears in kind of 2 of the different kind of narratives as well. And again, it comes back to like you said, like you can meet someone in 2 different perspectives, like 2 different circumstances, and it's also like the what if about all of this as well. How did you kind of come up with that aspect of the storyline as well? Was that something you built in from the beginning?
I think that was always something I wanted to play with, and I had an idea and it never ended up in the book, but my original idea was, not for the whole novel, but just a tiny part of it, would be that there would be somewhere and Lily would overhear his name being said and turn around and speak to him, and one of the other boys would be in exactly the same scenario, maybe putting his coat into like a cloakroom, and he would say his name and she wouldn't turn around. And that difference of that, you just hear someone's name and you either turn around or you don't, depending on what they're called. And so and I mean, it's funny when you think back to those little ideas, where to me that in a way that feels like a lost idea, that I still feel a little bit sad that didn't make it into the novel, but also very aware that there are 1,000 different versions of this novel out there, depending on, I would sit there, because I wrote most of this novel longhand with a pen and notepad. And I would sit there each day and I'd go and sit on the sofa and I would take my notepad and 2 different pens with me. And I would just have this, it wasn't a big thing, but it was always just a moment of which pen am I going to write with today? Because there's also a feeling that, I mean, I obviously clearly massively overthink all this kind of thing, but I suppose I was just aware that, but a different pen could produce a different story today.
I love that. I absolutely love that. And I think there needs to be more of that kind of almost not whimsy, but that wonder of like what could come next depending on the decision that I make right now. Like that's I absolutely love that. That's very much, I find myself thinking about those things an awful lot as well, because you just don't know. You don't know what from any decision or circumstance or meeting somebody, or I think there's a lot of fun that actually comes from playing through with those ideas. Sorry,
I feel like I've really revealed my woo-woos.
I love that.
Apologies for that.
I love it. No, please don't worry at all. I feel very privileged we get to hear these things. That's amazing. Are there any other do you have any other kind of rituals when you were writing that you kind of felt help shape the novel, or just generally help you write?
Gosh, I'm trying to think whether I do have any rituals. I think the one thing that's probably marked in my writing is that I don't talk about it to anyone outside my family while I'm, so I don't tell anyone about the actual story. That's, I had one person, Sarah, who was outside my family actually with the names, who I did speak to about it. But generally it tends to be something where I feel like if I talk about it, the idea just might kind of die and deflate. And so I don't tend to speak about, so with my next novel, I'm happy to talk about the process things around it, but I don't tend to mention at all what it's about. So I suppose that is quite a superstition kind of based thing. I'm not a superstitious person at all, but I think I maybe do have a little bit of a weird feeling around that.
I think it to me sounds like a little, it kind of, not to psychoanalyze you at all, but it seems like it kind of ties into the idea around the choice and the happenstance, and like, yeah, hearing someone else's perspective on that, what influence could that have on actually the kind of novel that you get at the end? And there's something really quite fascinating about having something that is entirely your work, entirely come from you, and not really had a massive bearing from somebody else, or at least in the first.
The other thing I'm thinking when you're saying that actually is how I wonder whether any people in your group who've maybe had a child, and when you're thinking of a name for your child, whether I think sometimes by voicing that name and other people having responses to it, it can change the feeling of that name for you, and maybe even make you decide, no, you don't want to use it. And it's almost that I think there's also a case for keeping it to yourself so that you don't get that external influence, and it's just, here's my child and this is what they're called when they're born. And that sometimes that can be a bit of a source of regret to have shared it too early, maybe. And maybe this is a little bit like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it makes so much sense, because it's, you just don't want to be put off by other people. And I think often as well, people will say things in a way that you'll say things with good intentions, right? Like, oh, so and so was, they could be a teacher, and they could say, oh, I've met many a Leah who's actually not great. And they mean it from a good place, but actually that can really, have such a profound effect on someone's kind of view of either their own work, whether that be a child or a book. That I think, it's I once actually had a very long conversation at work around feedback, and it was the kind of idea that feedback is a good thing if both parties are willing to kind of give and receive at the same time. Sometimes it's not great to kind of give feedback if someone's not willing to, is not in the right place to receive it. But equally, sometimes giving feedback is quite a hard thing to do, kind of knowing when the right time is. And I think it must be the same for kind of names and books. And also, I don't know, a bit of a throwaway thought, but I'm always of the opinion that lots of opinions that people have don't always need to be voiced. So I guess when it comes to baby names, that is a bold one, in my opinion, to give an opinion on, especially once a child's come, because that's not my business. So I think that's, absolutely fascinating. I'm just having a look through other questions. Candice asked, hi Florence, did you have a favourite name or narrative to write from for one of the boys, and which name would you choose for them?
I've kind of made a promise to myself that I will never say whether I had a favourite, because I feel like, as the writer, if I say that I had a favourite narrative, that will then stick in other people's minds and that's the one that's the true version of what might have happened. And so I kind of hold that back to myself. But also, I don't think I do actually have a favourite one. I think it changes from whenever I think about it. I think there are different aspects of the different narratives where maybe there's a relationship between two people or a couple in a certain narrative that I really love, but maybe there's the creativity of Julian's story that I really like, and certainly actually the landscape of Julian's narrative and being in Ireland I just loved, and that always felt like such a nice place to go from a writing perspective. But I think or for Gordon Jr. I feel so I think because I knew through the whole time I was writing that he would come good in the end. I felt so protective over him because he's so horrendously manipulated and weaponized by his dad that I suppose in that storyline I feel incredibly fond of him, because I think he just has such a hard path to get to where he needs to go. And so I think there's things in each of them that I feel really fond of, but I guess I'm interested in which Candice, which was her favourite out of them, and whether she's asking partly because she had one herself.
I would also love to know that, Candice. Please do let us know in the Q&A box. Sophie has also asked around the names. Were there always going to be 3 names for the boy, or did you cut down the amount of names for as kind of names as well?
I love the idea that there might, and there is a thing where it does feel like there could have been a 4th and a 5th and a 6th story, but there's a limit to what you can ask the reader to hold in their mind and what I could have woven together with any kind of there's a point at which it just becomes too much spaghetti. So no, I think it was always 3. It felt like it couldn't possibly be less than 3, because I think 3 is that number where you get to see comparison more. It just works better from a comparative point of view. And I suppose because my ultimate purpose with the novel was always that I wanted to get to the end and think, well, which was the better life? And 3 felt like the right number for doing that with to me.
Absolutely. I think definitely 3 felt like the magic number for this book. It gives you enough to kind of contemplate, but not too much that you feel overwhelmed. Just going back to Candice for a second, she's said that she's not fully finished the book yet, so she hasn't yet picked a favourite name or narrative. She just wanted to be nosy and ask.
Oh gosh, I'm sorry, I've done so... there's been so many spoilers, sorry.
No, it's okay. Unfortunately, I fear with these things, it's very hard to do them without spoilers. Yeah. Especially with some of the questions that I like to ask. Actually, one of the questions that kind of came into my mind as you were talking about the boys' names was there like a specific choice to write from a boy's perspective? Because obviously you could have written the same book, but from Maya's perspective with 3 different names. Like, and also this, in the past year, there's been a lot more kind of talk, gladly, a lot more talk around kind of the experience of being a teenage boy and kind of the influence that the world can have on that in great ways, and also in kind of slightly more terrifying ways as well for young people, both men and women. But yeah, I'm just kind of curious as to whether that was a choice or coincidence.
I think that when it comes to writing fiction, I'm always most comfortable writing the characters who are furthest away from me in terms of their makeup. And so the most difficult person for me to write is someone who is a white, middle-class, middle-aged woman. And the people who I find most joyful to write are the people where to inhabit them, I'm having to fully use my imagination. It feels less fun when that person's more like me. And I suppose because it's harder to separate, I don't want to write fiction that's got me in it, because I'm kind of with me all the time, and so I'm quite bored by me. It's my characters that I'm really excited about and who I want to be with when I'm writing. And I think sometimes it can be so hard to get away where you end and the character starts when you're writing something someone who's very close to you. So the idea for me of writing a teenage boy just feels like so liberating, because it's purely about imagination.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really fascinating. And yeah, I guess, I mean, you're making me want to start writing, because I feel like there's so many things that I have to learn about other people.
So lovely. I love that. Thank you.
Oh, honestly, I think it yeah, I feel like I should pick it up again. Did Definitely. Once upon a time when I was in school, but yeah, I think it's a great way to kind of work through your thoughts. And like you said, like kind of learn about other people through interrogating your own ideas as well.
And I think for me, because I'm just a chronic overthinker, and it's so exhausting sometimes to be with your own thoughts, that actually getting to be with these characters and think through their predicaments and their kind of losses and griefs and their joys is so much richer than what's whirring around in your, the same scripts that are whirring around in your own head, that it's so lovely to be spending time with other people.
Absolutely. I love that. And I'm definitely gonna have to go away now and have a go at doing even just like something short, I think, just to kind of have a go and
yeah, no, I think short stories are often can be I love shorts. I've been reading Curtis Sittenfeld's short stories recently, and I love her short stories because they feel just so complete, and she's so good at telling you the most human thing about a person, so that in one sentence she'll just deliver you straight to their vulnerability, or the thing that makes them slightly ridiculous or self-conscious. And but I think that the really lovely thing about writing short stories is that it's a way of playing with ideas to almost work out whether you want to play with them more, or whether whether you're satisfied by the time you get to the end of that short story, and whether it feels complete.
That's fascinating. And I think, what was the name of the book you mentioned? Sorry.
Curtis Sittenfeld. So she has written, she's got 2 collections of short stories, and one is called You Think It, I'll Say It, and the other one is called, oh gosh, what's it called? The other one's more recent.
Show Don't.
Pardon?
Show Don't Tell. Yeah,
absolutely, yeah. And both of them are just utterly glorious. She's just magnificent.
Amazing, thank you. I'm definitely gonna have to go away, and I'm such a researchy person before I do anything. So I think kind of introduce myself back into short stories to maybe have a go at myself is a great way. Molly's also kind of said, hi, I just wanted to say thank you as well for writing such an incredible book. It's definitely my favourite book I've read in the last few years, and have honestly raved about it and recommended it to so many people. Which,
oh, thank you so much.
I think it must be lovely to kind of hear such.
Yeah, that means a lot.
Definitely. Julia has said that she grew up as someone who grew up watching my mum shift between fear, silence and hope, and then losing her at a young age. Your book really resonated with me. But one thing I never really considered was having the idea of having it in me, that propensity for violence. Do you have any thoughts on motivations of people?
Gosh, firstly, I'm really sorry that you lost your mum at such a young age. That sounds just, well, yeah, impossibly hard. I suppose that I suppose I'm thinking with Julian about. Sorry, can you remind me of the question? Sorry, I was
of course
thinking about.
No, of course. She
yeah,
said one thing she never considered was the idea of having it in me, that propensity for violence. Do you have any thoughts on motivations of people?
So I think that that's something that all 3 of my boys worry about. And I think the place where I feel it the most is with Julian, in a way, because he is, I think Gordon already knows that he has a little bit of that within him, because he's been brought up in his father's mold. And so I think that he's aware that that's in him. But what I think is really hopeful is that even when he's aware that that's in him, it's also that actually, yes, he's made some terrible mistakes, and no, he can't put them right, and it's too late to ask for Lily's forgiveness, because actually that would be more about in service of him rather than in service of her. And so he knows he can't ask for her forgiveness. But the thing he can do is ask forgiveness from the world, and to ask, will you accept me as this person that I am now? And that we're not just the product of one mistake or one bad decision. It's that we have the opportunity to reprove ourselves or redefine ourselves with each decision that we come to about deciding the person that we are. But then if you look at Julian, I don't think he has that propensity in him at all. I just don't think it's there. And so I don't think there was nothing that I was trying to suggest with the book that if you're brought up in a violent household, that would then mean that that's just not something I believe. And it's hopefully something that isn't there in the book either, that we see with Julian and also with Bear. I mean, there's a bit where I think he says to his mum that he was standing in the supermarket checkout line and feeling really impatient with the people in front, and he's thinking, is this that bit of me, that bit that's feeling furious because I'm having to wait? And she says, no, it's just no one likes having to queue. It's, we're all bad at that. And so I think they worry about what's in them. But also for Julian, I think that he, finding out at a much older age that he was meant to be called after his father, he was meant to be called Gordon, but wasn't, and was given a different name, and actually for a reason that was actively saying you are nothing like him, was such a liberation. And yeah, that he was lucky, I guess, in that he had that defining thing that acted as a liberation, but actually he was the same person all along. He was never going to do any of those things anyway. That just wasn't who he was.
I think that's a really lovely and like very filled out response in a really lovely way. It's and I think particularly like with you said with about Julian, I think the worry was the bigger kind of restraint for him than the actual any propensity himself. And
Yeah,
I think to have that self-awareness in a level, like in a sense, to be so concerned that you are related to someone or something with such a kind of visceral, and to have such a visceral reaction to that, I think it speaks kind of volumes about someone's character. I think to have that level of self-awareness and it's quite amazing. But also, Julia, thank you for sharing that, because
thank you.
Yeah, that's really, like, it obviously sparked some really interesting discussion there. Thank you. Misfit, who I think is Sam, has said, not a question, but wow, that epilogue, which, sorry, apologies. Absolutely. I mean, it kind of threw another kind of curveball in. Did you always know you were going to write an epilogue when you kind of wrote the book?
Yeah, right at the start of the novel, I knew there'd be an epilogue. And the reason for that was because I felt that if I left the reader on one of the boys' stories, whichever one came last, that would be the one that felt most true and most valid. And so I knew that there would be an epilogue, and there were a limited number of characters that could carry that epilogue, because it had to be someone where, so say someone like Shilva or Kora couldn't have carried the epilogue because they weren't there at the end of all of the stories, and so that would narrow it down as to which one. And I think with Gordon, I was very aware that to not have him reappear in the story at all would have been like, there was a big bad wolf and he ran away and everyone lived happily ever after, and it would have been quite unrealistic. And while I think I mentioned earlier that I hadn't wanted to involve him in the story and give him a voice, what I think I did want to do was give some kind of resolution for the reader of him having a moment where he realizes what he's done and the impact that he had on his family. And it's too late for him to put anything right, and it's probably too late for any kind of redemption for him. But the thing it's not too late for is for him to just imagine one scene from his life where he could have done something better.
Mm-hmm.
And that's that he could have let Cora's hand go in that first meeting rather than, but I think that I also wanted to, he'd built himself up as a very godlike character, and almost as though he was invincible. And I think in that final scene, we see him as more human and vulnerable and fragile, and realizing that he is just realizing he is human and he's not invincible, and that he's humbled, and also that a lot of the other characters in the novel are free and he's trapped in a prison of his own making at the end. And I suppose I wanted to look at those ideas, not really in a punitive way, but in a way where there just felt like there was a little bit of a push-pull around some kind of resolution for him, but not too much. Because I didn't want to ask the reader to forgive him in any way. So that was the reason. But then also the other fun thing about the epilogue is that once we're past that bit, is it allowed me to play with all the different points at which their lives could have gone spinning off in different directions, which I just love doing. So it felt like, to me, a really fun way to end the novel, and like maybe there was hope in that as well.
Definitely. I think it was it really just kind of hammers home the idea of choice and the choices we make and the kind of various choices that you could make and what that could look like. And I think it was kind of the cherry on top of a fantastic cake of a book.
Thank you.
Have such a interesting and insightful, but also emotive kind of epilogue as well. Yeah, really felt like there were a lot of loose ends tied up, but also a few nice kind of ones dribbled in there as well, which is always a nice place to be. Just going back to kind of the discussion we had about names and not having opinions on other people's babies. Chloe has said that she's currently pregnant, so congratulations. And she's choosing not to share any names at all, so they're not spoiled for us. I think that's a great thing. And Fran has said, not a question, but totally agree with Florence RE names. It's my husband's family tradition to name all the firstborn son the same, and I felt so strongly that this was assigning him a character and future that was predestined. We chose a totally different name and it felt much more free.
Oh, that's lovely.
Definitely.
I feel I should say though actually as well that the name, this book isn't in any way a judgment on people who do use inherited names, because I also think often I wrote about this one family where it's a really negative thing, but I think often it can be such a tribute to people and given out of fondness. And my son actually has my father's first name as his middle name. And so it's not, I was, you know, you write something and then think, gosh, I hope people don't think I'm judging in this kind of, and so I always kind of feel like I do want to offer that up and say it's not a judgment as well. But yeah.
No, definitely. I think like we said before, names are such an important thing, and I think to have named someone or to name someone after somebody else is a huge tribute to that person. But obviously if they do it for the right reasons, and not in the case of Baby Gordon, where it's to pass on this idea of yourself rather than kind of a tribute, as it were. So yeah, I think don't worry too much about people reading into that bit too. I think the question around names is probably what I hope most people take away. Someone has said, hi Florence, this story has stuck with me and has been a huge source of inspiration with me to get back to writing.
I'm so pleased.
She said, do you have any tips for getting started? I have the blank page fear.
Oh, well, so many tips actually. I kind of don't know quite where to begin with it, but one, I think if you've got the blank page fear, is to not buy any expensive stationery, not buy an expensive notepad. Buy the most unintimidating, scruffiest notepad you can. And when I look back at my notepads for writing the names, they've got pretty much about 70% of the manuscript in there, but also within that there's kind of the number of the plumber who was going to come and fix, and all it's, and I think it's to be unprecious about your writing, so that when you sit down, you're not expecting yourself to do anything grand or amazing. You're basically saying to yourself, you can make mistakes, and it's, you know, it's fine to make mistakes. And that feels really important to me as a starting point. But I think it's also to read, and that when I read something that I'm really inspired by and that I really love, that's the thing that makes me want to go and return to my own page and think, oh gosh, I'm so desperate to do that too. And so I think to read things that just, read the things that set you alight and make you want to write. I think I've probably got so many more ideas than that, but mine's suddenly gone to a bit of a blank page, so sorry. But good luck.
Oh, I love that. I think there's definitely always something around just doing something. It doesn't have to be good, but just starting is always the hardest part.
The other thing that I don't know whether you've heard of Julia Cameron's Morning Pages, but I think, it's brilliant. And I'm sure loads of your readers will have heard of this. But she has this thing where she says you write 3 sides of paper, stream of consciousness, you do not stop writing. And so if your mind dries up, you're literally writing, I don't know what to write next. And sometimes you might be writing just about what you're going to do that day. And other times you may be writing about something that you're really struggling with, that you just can't work out how to get around it. And I think that act of every single morning, you're spending time covering 3, and actually to do that it doesn't take that long. It's 10 to 15 minutes. It's so quick because you're not stopping. You're literally just keeping on going. And I think what that does is it takes away the fear of the blank page. And it also gets your hand just used to moving across a page, so that writing is then the most unintimidating thing to do because you know how to keep your pen moving. And I think that is it with a manuscript, is that often it's just about keeping on going and not being almost scared of your own shadow, and you're scared of your own weight of expectation.
That's amazing. I absolutely love that. And I love the kind of bit you said at the end there about not being scared of your own kind of expectation. I think that's something that probably most people, especially women, probably struggle with the most, is not wanting to mess it up. But actually, like you said, just kind of exercising yourself to kind of just write about anything and to give yourself that safe space. I think that's a really important thing. And also I really like the idea of writing down things first thing in the morning. It's a great way to clear your mind before you kind of go about your day.
Completely,
that's incredible. Jasmine has said that she thinks the book has resonated with her so much because her day job is a child therapist. I found the narrative so compelling to see how the paths diverge so much from one choice and how much of the children's narratives are set by their experiences. She's recommended it to all her colleagues.
Oh, thank you so much. Also, what an amazing job. That sounds so interesting.
It does, doesn't it? It's absolutely fantastic. Well, I said to you kind of before we started and let everyone in that we would do a little bit about kind of what are you reading, because it's still book club and it's still like, that's my favorite question always, is what are you reading at the moment and are you enjoying it?
Oh, I've read so many good things recently. Oh, the most recent thing I read. So I listened on audiobook to a novel called Saoirse, and it's the Irish spelling of Sarah. And so it is such a difficult word to spell. I think it's Saoirse, but that could be wrong. And the reason why I'm telling you how to spell it is because I can't actually remember quite who it's by. It's by Charlene, and her surname begins with an H, but I can't remember what her surname is. And it was wonderful. It's set in Ireland, and it's about a woman who, she's an artist, and she's just launched an exhibition, and her life is told around memories evoked by each of the paintings in her exhibition. So it has this wonderful structure. And it's also got her, there's a man in it called Dahi, and he is one of those men where you just fall in love with him because he is so good and so just so kind and wonderful. And so I think it's a lovely novel also because of him, but it's just, it's I really enjoyed that. It was great. And what else have I read recently? Oh, Wally Lamb. There's a book called The River is Waiting, and it's set in a men's prison, and I read that and was just floored by it. It's really grueling and it's quite dark, but I think it's also, it feels, I don't know, when you say a book feels necessary, it makes it feel so worthy and like, oh gosh, no, that's the last thing I want to read. But I just think it's so, I don't know what word, I'm really rubbish at selling books to people, but it's like, I just thought it was wonderful, and I don't know quite how to put into words why I thought it was wonderful. But yeah, that one really stayed with me. And what else have I read recently that I've loved? Lake Effect by Cynthia Dupree Sweeney. And this is a novel that is about a couple having an affair, and that affair breaks up two families. And so it's a really, really well-worn premise. And yet when you're reading it, you feel like you're reading about that for the very first time, and you've never read a book about divorce before at all, because it's so compelling and so fresh. And I thought that was absolutely brilliant.
That sounds amazing. The River is Waiting is one of those books I keep seeing around at the moment, and I've not heard anyone reading it or seen anyone reading it. So
they're all inside weeping afterwards. That's why they can't talk about it. I read it just before Christmas, so I'm out of that phase now.
But no, I think it's amazing when you kind of find these books where you do think like this is so necessary and pertinent, and there's just like a real purpose to a book.
Also, in a way, partly to show how incapable the prison system is of helping people to rehabilitate. It's such a, how do people rehabilitate in an atmosphere where they're often so scared, and where there often aren't the resources for them to find out who they could be? And I don't think that's true of all prisons. I think some prisons are doing it brilliantly, and I think there's also some amazing charities that go into prison. There's a charity called Fine Cell Work that teaches prisoners how to sew, and they then make things that are she runs a chain of hotels, and she's called Kit Kemp, and so she has contributed to Fine Cell Work, where she's created these beautiful patterns that the prisoners then copy and make, and these are the most gorgeous cushions that you would absolutely kill to have in your home. But what it's doing is it's teaching the prisoners a skill, and it's also giving them money that they can either send to their families or have something for when they come out of prison. But one of the Fine Cell Work have done an amazing amount of research into what learning to sew does for prisoners, and what they've found is that the prisoners who are sewing tend to not get into fights because they know that those privileges will be taken away from them, but also because the effect of doing that meditative, repetitive act just sends that impulsive anger response right down, and just changes their way of dealing with the world. And I think when you hear about schemes, the prison tangents, but anyway, I think that I've got probably quite a natural interest in that, because it just feels so like if someone's going to be in a prison, then you want them to come out a better person for themselves, but also for all of us, to make everyone safer. And so it feels really important that they get prisons right.
Definitely. I think
Wally, sorry, go.
No, go for it, please.
So I think one of the things that Wally Lamb's novel is showing is the many ways in which they're not right. I mean, it's set in America, so it's a slightly different prison system to ours, but it is also showing those little cogs in the system where you get these really brilliant people who can actually make a difference to people. And so it's got the light and dark in it. It's really wonderful.
I love that. And I mean, it's such an interesting setting as well, because I often think that people that work, or people that are in prison, are often actually really forgotten in society. In general, I used to work in like a labour markets, so thinking about like, why do people work, why do they not work, and like what's the barrier, basically. That was a big thing. And actually, since kind of doing that, I now try and volunteer when I can with like a charity that goes into prisons and does CV work and interview skills with prisoners.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, it's called Standout, and it's great. And
I haven't heard of that. That's fantastic.
No, I found it through LinkedIn of all places, because someone else I went to university with now does it as well. And it again comes back down to the idea of like having a bit of self-belief. And I think oftentimes if you end up in one of these situations, being in prison, your lack of self-worth could be pretty awful, especially if you have like people on the outside, or for whatever reason, like however you've ended up in prison. For a lot of people, like you, I'll end up reflecting on that for a significant amount of time. But actually, I think, and again, like in the book, in your book specifically, the kind of choices that you make aren't necessarily like the person that you are or have to be. You can very much kind of do a lot around that, and trying to help someone like recognize like those things about themselves where they do have skills, and actually they are inherently a good person, but actually like, how do we apply your skills, and how do we also unfortunately have to navigate like other people having biases towards you, but how can you do things in a way that frames it so that you're kind of putting your best foot forward and giving yourself the best chance, because you deserve that. So yeah, if anyone is interested in any of those things, I mean, I've just kind of bookmarked Fine Cell Work to send to my sister, because I think she'd really find that very interesting as well. But there's just so much around. I'm definitely gonna have to get The River Is Waiting now. Like, you absolutely sold that to me. I think you've
good. I'm glad.
No, it's fantastic. but yeah, I think we're coming almost to the end. But it's been so lovely having you. The last question I have for you is, can you tell us a little bit about your next book, please?
Oh gosh, no.
Just the process, just the process.
So the process is proving very different for this one. Whereas I wrote my last novel using pen and paper and curled up on my sofa, this novel, and I thought that was my method, this novel is unfolding sitting at my desk in front of my laptop. And but I also think that novels have phases as well. So I wouldn't be surprised if at some point I return to my notebook. But I don't know, I kind of think each novel has its own energy and its own way of coming into the world. And this seems to be this one's, but I'm only about a third of the way through it, so I'm not very far through it, and I'm still kind of finding my way with it.
Amazing. And will it be where your agent is trying to find you a publisher, or will you be publishing with the same publisher?
I have just my dream publisher. I'm with Phoenix, who are part of Orion, and I have the most amazing editor who I just adore, and I already know that this novel will be with her, and I just couldn't be happier with that. It's so lovely to feel that because you know that whatever novel you write, it's going to be imperfect, and that it's going to, well, I mean, even once it's been edited, it's still imperfect, but it's going to need a really wise and safe pair of hands to get it to where it needs to be. And in Francesca, my editor, I totally have that, and I just trust her implicitly. And she's so one of the amazing things that she does is when she's editing, she's always trying to understand, well, why is your character doing that? And sometimes she might misunderstand why your character's doing that. And the minute you say to her, oh no, he's not like, that's not his motivation, it's this, she's immediately repositioned herself to where your character is, and is then thinking about it she's just so good at standing exactly where your character is and listening to what you're saying their motivations are, and then trying to work with you rather than trying to twist them to be round to her idea of what they should be. And she's wonderful. I love her.
That sounds amazing. That definitely sounds like kind of the dream kind of writer and editor, author-editor relationship that you would want. And that's amazing. And just a very curious point. Did she have any say in your last, your cover for the names?
Oh yes, she did. Yes, she was wonderful. They came up with this, the man, he's actually a painting by an artist called Eva Navarro. It looks like it's a photo, but it is a painting. It's in acrylics, and she's Spanish. And she actually painted that. It's just a man she saw walking along a beach, and she painted him. And he will have no idea that he's on a cover of a book, and no one will ever know who he is, because she has no idea who he is. But then my publisher put the 3 shadows coming out of him. Not out of him, just from him. But anyway, they'd been working on this cover for months and coming up with trying to find a way to make it work. And they said to me, after months, we said, could we see the cover, please? This was me and my agent. And they kind of said, well, we can show you what we've done, but we're not happy with it, and you can't have it. Because we've got this man and we just can't find a way to make him work, but we'll show you him. And they showed him to me, and I was just like, oh, he's literally perfect. I adore him. Please, could you find a way of making this work? And they went and explored a whole load of other ideas. And then I think it is just that, because the cover actually looks so simple, but to get to the really simple idea that looks perfect, it's such a slog to get. It's such a slog to get to the right simple idea that when you see it, you're like, well, how did you not think of that? It's so simple, but somehow it is just so difficult to get to the right version of simple. And they worked on it for quite a lot more months, and then came up with this. And it was one of those things where they just showed me it, and I instantly loved it. And so I feel like I've been really lucky with my cover.
Oh, I'm so glad. It's honestly, I think it really stands out on a bookshelf. And also, I mean, there are some amazing artists out there and some amazing publishers and editors who come up with some really cool covers, but yours is so unique and it's so noticeable. So
thank you.
Very pleased that you kind of yeah, it was like such an iterative phase, but I think and you're happy with it as well. It's amazing. But I must wrap up now. But thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much. This has been lovely.
It's been such a nice evening. I mean, for a Tuesday evening, there's no better way to spend it, in my opinion. But thank you so much. And please do come back once your new book is published. I would love to speak to you again, and we can do this all over again. And I'll have 1 million other questions for you.
Oh, this has been absolutely lovely. What a lovely way to spend an evening. Thank you so much and thank you to everyone who's been listening and asking questions as well.
Absolutely. Thank you all for coming, and I hope everyone has a lovely evening.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.